Hey guys, how's everything going? This is JSer. As a web front-end developer, I see that the technology is evolving every day, right? With the new frameworks, new libraries, new ideas, new concept, and those new stuff forms into some fancy words that people are in this realm are talking about. In this video, I'm going to list up some of the fancy abbreviations. Some of them are very mature, everybody knows. Some of them are new, and I don't know all of them. I'm going to just list them up and have a brief introduction with my own understanding. And possibly in the future, I will pull up some more videos in the details of them. Okay, so let's begin. So the first one, SPA, a single page application. This is pretty old. I think everyone knows it, so I'll skip it. It generally means that we put the web application into one page and use the client-side rendering to fetch data to render UI without reload to improve the performance. Okay, so as the counterpart, the things that not single page application would be MPA, multiple page application. This is less familiar, I would say. I seldom talk about this word. People just to say SPA or non-SPA. So yeah, what about like the multiple single SPA? Like you have a bunch of single page applications grouped together to generate a big web application. That will kind of like a mix, right? Multiple page application. Anyway, this is less used, I would say. Just remember, from MPA, there might be a lot of hard reload. Or if you're using micro front end, actually there will not be so much hard reload, which is a nice framework to group multiple SPA into one page, and yeah, and that would also count. So that is that multiple page application. I don't know. Next one, CSR, client-side rendering. Yeah, this is like the basic elements of what SPA is. So we do rendering on the client side. Usually we just use JavaScript, fetch some data, and just to create the DOM nodes and put it into the browser to display. So this is client-side rendering. Okay. So the counterpart of client-side rendering is SSR. Why a server-side rendering? This has already come around for a couple of years. Why SSRs are important is for some reasons. So the one demerit of CSR is that we need to download a lot of code to enable client-side rendering because the logic of rendering is not easy, right? We need to download the logic first and then put the data and then use that logic against the data to render something. So to load the logic, there will be some delay in the first contentful paint. So that's basically why SSR are important, is that we could do some server-side rendering to generate HTML and serve to the browser. Of course, the logic to render, the logic to do CSR will be also served as well. And to the user, the UI will be displayed much faster because the raw HTML is served, and the logic kicks in. It will just hydrate and it will not alter the DOM, but just do some bootstrapping work, and it will just help boost the performance. And also SSR kind of helps the SEO, or even though that Google says it's the Google search engine would also be able to understand the single page application, but generally SSR will be better. So this is the SSR, and also there's one called SSG, static site generation, or officially it's called SG, static generation. This is kind of like a lot of libraries or services. I don't know, like Stack Fleets or something, and or Next.js, they are doing like this static generation. The idea is kind of like the SSR, but we do it a little step further. Some pages, like they don't, depending on the query, they're static. Like you're building a about page, right? They don't change. We could just rather than just generating the HTML on the fly every time the request is come in, we could just generate the HTML statically and just serve the HTML, and or we put the HTML on the CDN. It will just feel pretty fast, right? So that's the static generation. Okay, this is kind of interesting. It's will boost the performance to the extreme, and if we cannot do static generation, like it's the content dynamically, we could consider SSR and put the logic in the server side, and then put the logic into CSR to do more client-side rendering. So we could see this kind of levels. Okay, the next one, ISR, Incremental Static Regeneration. This is the concept from Next.js. So the idea is simple. If we do static generation, think about like a website containing like thousands of static pages. Like, for this EC side, we could create each page for a single SKU, right? Like a product. And then the build time for this stack generation would drag down the performance of developing. Like every time I make a change, I need to rebuild the content, like for hours maybe. I haven't met that the case. So this ISR is a combination of static generation and server-side rendering. So the idea is we only do static generation for the very, very critical pages, like, I don't know, top 10 pages people access. And for the rest, we just delay it. Like you could think that like this is lazy load or something. So these static generation would only be executed when the request comes, and then after that, the cache will be used, and there is expiration. So after a certain time, this contents will rebuild again when the request comes in. Just kind of like a Redis key value pair. We could set an expiration, right? When we request a key, we get the data, and if it expired, we remove it, and next time we would create a new data. So yeah, this is the incremental static regeneration. Could think about like a dynamic static generation. DPR. DPR is something I found on the last one. It's called Jamstack, but it's distributed persistent rendering. It's similar to ISR. The only difference is kind of like we mentioned that for ISR, the dynamic generated static contents will be expiring after a certain time, right? So the regeneration process will kicks in periodically. But for DPR, we don't. So it will be only be generated for once, and it will be so that's why it's called persistent. You could think like this is one delayed static generation, and this one is dynamic static generation. Okay, next one, RC. This is a new concept called React Server Component. This is very interesting. I haven't understand the core. I would make another video explaining this one, and maybe I'll put up some demos. But the idea is pretty straightforward. So if we're doing everything on the client side, right? If we're doing everything on the client side, that you're doing the what is that? It's CSR. There will be a lot of wasted code and time. So if we are going to do some components with heavy calculation, like the basic example the React team shows us is the markdown rendering. If we need to parse to markdown syntax, it will cost like, I don't know, 200, 300 kilobytes of JavaScript code. But to the user, you only want some rendering of that markdown file. So the idea of React server components is that we could put that logic in the server and just serve the elements to the React runtime, and put that logic in the server does not only mean we can reduce those libraries we use, third-party libraries like heavy logic, but also we could just access the data directly on the server side, right? On the client-side rendering, we need to fetch the data through the API. Obviously, that costs cause a delay, right? We request, we get the response, there's the delay, and in the server, well, if it's on the same server, we could just fetch data through the DB. But if there's some other DB services internally, there will still be some delays, but it will be much faster. We could possibly think the servers are like close to each other, like in the same data center or something. So this React server component idea could do two things. One, improve the component generation by removing the logic from the client side, and reduce the bundle size for this JavaScript code, and also removes the delay or improves the delay of data fetching. So this is React server component. It's kind of like I remember there's once a concept of PJAX, right? When we first introduced the Ajax by Google, I guess it was very fascinating. It's just the beginning of CSR, the client-side rendering. But in one of my past work, what we did is that we did some experiment by not only Ajax but using PJAX, meaning we're not just fetching data from the server, but fetch the rendered data from the server side, meaning the HTML fragment, not the whole HTML document, but the HTML fragment, and get the fragment and then put the fragment directly into the DOM container. So it will help two aspect. One is the HTML generation, right? When the HTML is very complicated, doing it on the server is obviously much more performant than doing it on the client side. And also, we could just put the fragment directly in the container rather than generate the DOM nodes like using a recursive fashion. So that could improve the performance. Well, the downside is that the response will be heavier than the pure data. Well, sometimes it's true, but sometimes not true, but most of the time it is true. But generally, it will help to improve the performance. It will feel much smooth. So I think the server side React server component is kind of like PJAX, because React is rendering the application with a virtual DOM, which is the you could think of it like another representation of the DOM node, and corresponding to this PJAX approach. Obviously, we would naturally think that we could serve those virtual DOM nodes by fragments, right? So that's React server components. Yeah, it's PJAX on VDOM. So that's my understanding. Stay tuned for my next video, possibly soon. I will just explain that better with a demo. RSC, yeah. Next one is Jamstack. So that's kind of like the new concept I heard of. The Jamstack, the Jam means the JavaScript, API, and markup. So it's a stack means the architecture. So Jamstack is a modern web development architecture based on client-side JavaScript, reusable APIs, and pre-built markup. So it's not that useful, I would say. So it's like a concept for possibly all modern web application development, right? Yeah, we're running the app in JavaScript by fetching some API and markup, and it actually includes all those like Next.js. Even though there are some concepts like static generation, it's also like here the pre-built markup. Yeah, so the fundamentals are not changing. We're still in this concept even though we're doing all those fancy stuff. But anyway, it's cool to say it, Jamstack. Yeah, all of our apps are Jamstack, I would say, except there's some very simple pages. They're not. Awesome. So this is some abbreviations I can think of. If you have some have more, you can comment below this video. We can cover that in the following videos. But anyway, hope it helps. Stay tuned. Bye bye.